I realized that the deal for enlightenment was such: everything for truth and nothing for me. And so I made the deal. I made it okay. Everything for truth and nothing for me. I made it okay for me to die and lose my family and lose my future. I went home after the retreat, I had a quiet night, and the next morning when I woke up, Vishrant was gone. Welcome to Satsang. So I get questions from people wanting me to describe what it was like to become enlightened. What was that experience like? It began by being in retreat with an enlightened man, and I'd been on the retreat for, it was a 2-week retreat, and it was the second last day before the retreat finished. And I'd given that enlightened teacher a deep tissue massage because that was my profession back then to some degree. And he'd invited me to come to Europe on his tour to Europe and be his masseur. And at the time, I hesitated because I had a wife and 2 little kids and a 3rd child from another relationship that I was supporting. And I thought, if I go to Europe, I might not be able to support them as well as I could if I was here. And so it was left. I drove him home to his place that night, and then I drove back. And on the way back, my heart got broken because I felt like I'd betrayed truth. So I started having a look at it. And I think a month before the retreat, I'd taken out a massive amount of life insurance because I thought that, well, if I do wake up, I might die during the awakening, so I would like to take care of my family. And so I took out a large insurance policy. And so that was covered, that they would be financially okay for the rest of their lives. And I drove around slowly around a country town, and I just cried all night. I just drove and drove and drove. And come 6 o'clock in the morning, I'd been driving all night. I turned up to the place that he was staying, and I wanted to see him because I'd made a decision that I had enough money for my family to be taken care of for a few months if I was away. I'd saved it, and I was quite prepared to be his masseur because I didn't like the idea of betraying my teacher, because to me it was like betraying truth. So I went to the house where he was staying. It was probably 6 o'clock in the morning, and I waited And I waited and I waited. I waited in the kitchen, which was just above the stairs, where he would come down from wherever he was sleeping. And around 9 o'clock, 3 hours later, he came down and he looked at me as he came down the stairs, and there was probably a half a dozen people in the room. He looked at me for quite a long time, and then he said, "What do you want?" And I said, I would like to take up your offer to come to Europe and be your masseur. And he looked at me again, and it must have been for a couple of minutes, just silent. And he said, "I don't think so." And then he just walked off. Something inside of me broke, and it was like my heart had this metallic worm running through it, and it was so painful. So I went back home to where I was staying with my wife and my kids, and come 10 o'clock, the next meeting, the last day of the retreat, was to begin. And I arrived with my wife. Someone was taking care of the kids, babysitters, I think. And we both arrived at this venue, and he came in, and for the whole day, it felt like this metallic worm was crawling through my heart. And it was terribly painful. And there was a realization, because I was actually finding beingness, that I might not make it, that I might die. And time went by, the group continued, and at some point I came to an understanding that I needed to die for truth. I realized that the deal for enlightenment was such: everything for truth and nothing for me. And so I made the deal. I made it okay. Everything for truth and nothing for me. I made it okay for me to die and lose my family and lose my future. I went home after the retreat, back to the place we were staying. I had a quiet night, went to bed, and the next morning when I woke up, Vishrant was gone. There was no sense of being a somebody. There was no sense of being an I. And my mind was shocked. So I managed to drive the car back to Perth from the country town we were staying in, because you don't need an I to drive a car. The mind knows how to drive the car. And I was surprised because the I didn't come back. In the past, it had always come back after I'd experienced self as beingness. This time, it didn't come back. And I was surprised. And during the day, whatever I was in got bigger and bigger and bigger until I started finding myself as the universe. And every particle in it being love. And I tried explaining it to my wife, but she didn't understand. Because Vishrant was driving the car, she couldn't get that Vishrant had gone. But he had. So we got back to Perth, and I had to start work the next day, which is my normal business of working as a psychotherapist or a naturopath. The naturopathy part was more body work because I was a deep tissue masseur. And the first client came that morning. There was no sense of me being there. The sense of I had gone, and my mind was shocked again. And this person came in and they sat down, and I just stared at them. I couldn't talk. There was nothing to say. My mind had gone silent to a large degree. And I asked them at some point, what are you doing here? And they said they didn't know. They had lost their mind in the presence. And so they went on their way. And that was the last client I saw. I wasn't fit to be a naturopath or a psychotherapist anymore because, for starters, I didn't blink. I just stared into space. I didn't look away. My mind was silent. So I moved into this very large lounge room of the house that I was in. It was a second lounge room, but it was very large. And I just stayed in there, staring into space, not moving, not wanting to move, blissed out to the max. Day after day after day. I lost my client base, my naturopathy client base. I lost my psychotherapy client base. My mind knew what had happened. Awakening had occurred, though it was still shocked. My wife didn't really understand what had happened. After about a week, or a week and a half, I don't know how long exactly, she came to me and said, "My husband's gone, isn't he?" And I had to say to her, "Yes, he's not here anymore." That disturbed her a fair bit. And I noticed my own mind, nothing moved. She was so disturbed at the time that she took the kids and moved out. And I watched my mind, and nothing moved. Whatever was happening was perfectly okay. The deal that I'd made with truth, everything for truth, or everything for God and nothing for me, had taken. She came back again a week later or 2 weeks later. I wasn't going to abandon her. My mind was that of a man. Men don't abandon their children, they don't abandon their husband, their wives. They just don't do that. Only immature people do that. But it was very different. Trying to operate without an eye was different. My favourite thing was just to sit and stare into space. I started running a few little groups after a while, at night time, self-inquiry groups. And that led to me starting to hold satsang. Took a while, because I didn't really want to come out. I'd loved what was found. It was so beautiful, so serene, so vast. But I did come out, and I've been holding satsang now for 27 years since. Satsang literally means association with truth. I was existing as truth, and there was a field of energy created by that called a Buddha field. And people came to be in the Buddha field and came to listen to the stories. And all those who came were welcomed. And all those who came, I tried to help. So this is the short version of enlightenment.